Maybe your daughter could find the coat check. She doesn't exactly belong here. That was the sentence that froze the champagne in my hand before the flute even reached my lips. My name is Maya Brooks. I'm 34 years old. And that line, it came from my father, at his own retirement party, in front of 300 guests, in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. The chandelier above us gleamed like 1,000 icy judgments. Soft piano music floated through the room like it was trying to soften the sharpness of every conversation, but it couldn't dull the sting of those words. My father, Samuel Brooks, legendary CEO of Brooks Capital, was a towering figure in a custom Navy tuxedo, his voice crisp with self-satisfaction. He had just finished praising my 2 older brothers for their exploits in the company. Patrick, the mergers guy. Jonathan, the quant genius. And Maya, he added with a chuckle, swirling his scotch, is still chasing whatever she's chasing these days. Something with computers and the government. Very noble, I'm sure. Laughter rolled through the room like a wave, polite and poisonous. I was standing by the side wall, near the gilded mirror, my name misspelled on the place card beside a chair I hadn't even been assigned. I hadn't wanted to come, but the invitation had arrived weeks earlier. No, Ms. Maya Brooks, Director of Cyber Operations. Just Maya. Like I was still a sullen teenager, not a woman leading federal defense contracts. Tell me, have you ever walked into a room knowing you'd be invisible, and still hoped, naively, stupidly, that someone might see you? Before I go further, take a moment and subscribe to this channel. If you've ever been the black sheep, the disappointment, the one who didn't fit the family mold, this story is for you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where we're healing from tonight. Now, let's listen to my story journey. I had tried to look elegant that evening. Simple black gown, hair tucked in a low twist. I wore my late mother's pearl earrings, the ones she gave me before she passed, whispering, "You don't need their approval. You never did." I'd tucked them on as armor. But armor doesn't stop a father's ridicule when it cuts deep enough. I stayed quiet, as always. What could I say that would matter in a room like this? One where the worth of a child was calculated by portfolio yield? My brothers exchanged smirks from their banquet seats. Patrick raised his glass toward me in mock salute. I raised mine back, but I didn't drink. My throat was too tight. And then, just as I was turning to leave, a voice cut through the ballroom like a clean knife, deep, gravelly. "Wait, Maya Brooks?" Everyone turned. From the crowd emerged Robert Lansing, the chairman of Brooks Capital, my father's boss, the man who mentored him from an ambitious trader to a titan of the firm. He was walking directly toward me. "You're Maya Brooks?" he asked again. His tone wasn't curious. It was pointed, serious. "Yes," I said, cautious. He stopped, just a foot away. "You're the one behind Project Phoenix, aren't you?" My heart jolted. No one was supposed to know that. My father blinked from the stage, his face stiffening. "Robert, what are you talking about?" Lansing ignored him. He looked only at me. "I've been waiting to shake your hand for 2 years. You stopped a cyber espionage breach that would have crippled half the firms on Wall Street, including ours. I've never forgotten that." Gasps fluttered around us like a chorus of confused birds. My father's mouth opened, then closed. His glass trembled. And me? I just stood there. Because the moment I had longed for, the one where someone, anyone in my family's world would acknowledge me, had arrived. But not from my father. From the man standing just to his left. Lansing turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, you may not know this, but this woman, this government analyst you've all politely ignored, protected every dollar in this room. Maya, would you mind joining me on stage?" I hesitated, and then I walked. As I passed my father, he didn't move. His eyes couldn't meet mine. My brothers were frozen, their pride cracking like stained glass. And for the first time in my life, I felt taller than all of them. The applause that followed me to the stage wasn't thunderous, it was tentative, scattered. Not everyone knew who I was or why I suddenly mattered, but they clapped because Robert Lansing was clapping. And in a room like this, people followed power. I stepped up onto the stage, careful not to trip on the hem of my dress, and took my place beside the man who, for years, had been the shadowed name at the top of my father's business pyramid. I felt every eye crawling across my skin, some curious, some embarrassed, others ashamed. My father still hadn't moved. He stood frozen in place, like he'd seen a ghost holding his reputation in its hands. I didn't speak. Lansing did. "This young woman," he said, "was the key intelligence analyst on a case we now know as Operation Phoenix, an interagency effort that prevented a coordinated cyberattack targeting the financial sector. The attack was stopped in 2020, quietly, no press, no medals, because that's what real public service looks like. She never asked for credit, but today, she should receive it." I looked out at the crowd, at the faces that had laughed minutes earlier. I saw discomfort blooming like bruises on suits and sequined gowns. I saw my father's legacy standing on shaky legs. But as I stood there, I felt myself drifting, not physically, but emotionally, backward, to another ballroom, a smaller one with echoes and oil paintings instead of chandeliers. Back to the house I grew up in. Our family estate in Marin County wasn't just wealthy, it was rehearsed. The type of house where each flower bed had a gardener and each room had a purpose, but none of them had warmth. My mother tried to bring it, books in the kitchen, old jazz playing at night, but the air always felt as cold as the granite countertops. From the time I was 10, I knew I didn't fit. While my brothers mimicked Dad, Jonathan with his color-coded spreadsheets at age 12, Patrick reciting market summaries, my fascination was different. I loved puzzles, logic, computer codes. I didn't care about stocks. I wanted to understand how systems worked and how to protect them. At dinner, I'd try to explain things I was learning in school: cryptography, internet protocols, national security. Dad would wave me off. "That's not a career, that's a hobby." Jonathan would smirk. "You gonna work for free? Or just be a hacker in a hoodie?" I stopped talking after that. When I was 16, I was invited to a national cyber defense training camp. I had ranked second in California in a qualifying challenge, solving a simulation in under 3 hours. I was glowing with pride when I handed my father the certificate. He read the title, U.S. Cyber Patriot National Qualifier, and laughed. "Let me know when the Pentagon starts handing out stock options." My mother said nothing at the time, but later that night, when I passed her room, I saw her slipping something into a folder. That same certificate. She had laminated it, preserved it. For me. I still have it in my apartment drawer in D.C. It was her who believed in me. Quietly. Gently. But she died when I was 17. Heart failure. Sudden. Cruel. She collapsed one morning while reading the paper by the window. After that, the coldness in the house became permanent. Dad didn't say much. He worked longer hours. My brothers hardened. And I disappeared inside myself. Senior year, I applied to Stanford for computer science and public policy. When the acceptance letter came, I didn't celebrate. I just walked into my father's office, handed him the paper, and said, "I'm not going to Wharton." He didn't look up from his laptop. "You'll regret that," he said flatly. "You could have joined the firm. You could have made something of yourself." I turned away before he could see my tears. It was the first decision I made for myself, and it cost me everything. I moved out 2 months later. No ceremony, no family dinner. Just a quiet morning, a borrowed suitcase, and a cab waiting at the edge of our iron gate. No one came out to see me off. I still remember the way the fog curled around the edges of the street as we pulled away, swallowing the house I'd once called home. I watched it vanish behind me without turning back. Stanford was a different world. Diverse, chaotic, free. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who didn't care about legacy or stock options. They cared about ideas, about impact. I buried myself in my studies, system security, machine learning, policy ethics. I slept in libraries. I drank instant coffee until my hands shook. And I worked 3 part-time jobs just to avoid calling my father for help. Not once did he check in. No birthday calls, no holiday texts, nothing. But I kept going. It wasn't just ambition, it was survival. By my final year, I was already doing research for the Department of Homeland Security through a fellowship. They flew me to D.C. the week I graduated. I never even walked the stage at Stanford. My diploma was mailed in a flat white envelope I still haven't framed. I entered federal service as an analyst at 24, eyes wide, hope still flickering inside me. And then the shutdown started. Budget cuts, politics, turf wars between agencies. There were days I sat in a dark cubicle questioning everything. Why had I worked so hard? Why did I think one person could change anything? Then came 2020. The breach. It began as a whisper in the system. A small anomaly in traffic between 3 financial firms and a server farm overseas. Most dismissed it as noise, but I didn't. I stayed after hours, running simulations. I compared patterns. I followed the breadcrumb trail through a labyrinth of encrypted proxies and ghost IPs. And what I found? A coordinated attack, timed down to the second. A worm disguised inside a software update, ready to detonate across the trading infrastructure of 12 major institutions, Brooks Capital among them. I remember standing in the secure ops room at 3:42 a.m., shaking as I briefed my superiors. They asked me how sure I was. Enough to bet my life on it, I said. We launched a quiet countermeasure. We neutralized the worm and traced its origin to a rogue state actor. We buried the story in classified memos. The public never knew how close they came to financial collapse, and neither did my father. You see, I never told him. Why would I? He didn't want to hear about soldier work, as he used to call it, but word somehow traveled up the corporate chain. I didn't know until months later when a colleague forwarded me a redacted internal commendation memo, CC'd to Robert Lansing. My name was listed only once, buried halfway down the paragraph. And yet, that one buried mention changed everything. Not for me, for them. For years, I continued my work in silence. I led 3 more operations, built threat detection models now used across federal agencies, and rose to director of cyber operations before I was 33. Still, I never once received a call from my father, until the retirement party invitation. It arrived in a thick envelope with gold trim. No personal note, no title, just a generic insert with my name, Maya, on the guest list, wedged between Jonathan's wife and an unknown +1. I placed it on the kitchen counter and stared at it for days. Claire, my roommate and closest friend since grad school, found me standing over it one night in the dark. "You thinking of going?" she asked, gently. I shrugged. I don't even know why he invited me. She tilted her head. Maybe he didn't. That stung more than I wanted to admit. And yet, I packed a dress. I bought a plane ticket. Not to be seen, but maybe to finally be done. I landed in San Francisco 2 nights before the gala, hoping the extra time would ground me. It didn't. The city looked the same, chilly winds curling through the streets, fog rolling down Nob Hill like a curtain, But everything else had changed. Or maybe I had. My reflection in the hotel mirror didn't show the girl who used to cry in silence after dinners at the Brooks estate. It showed someone who had built her life from rubble, alone. Still, I couldn't stop the nerves. The night of the party, I arrived early. Stupidly early. I lingered in the lobby, sipping water I didn't want, watching golden light spill from the grand ballroom. Familiar faces strolled past, all hairspray and polished shoes. Executives, board members, my father's world. The room inside was cathedral-sized. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids curled around tall silver vases, wine flowing like water. I stood near the wall, clutching my tiny black clutch as if it could deflect judgment. Then came the speeches. They rolled out like a parade of praise. First Jonathan, then Patrick, each glorified as if they'd single-handedly rebuilt capitalism. My father stood at the center, his pride a spotlight that blinded everyone except the one child not basking in it. When he finally took the microphone, I knew what was coming. He opened with a joke about the early days. I built Brooks Capital from a folding chair and a rented office. Laughter. He toasted his mentors, thanked his colleagues. His wife, my stepmother, beamed beside him, dressed in emerald. And of course, my boys, he said, Jonathan and Patrick, my legacy. Everything I've built, they will continue. He paused. Then his eyes landed on me. And Maya, he said, with a chuckle that turned my stomach. Well, she took the road less profitable, works with computers and the government. Still finding herself, I think. Laughter. Again. I felt the room shrink. The walls closed in. I could barely breathe. It was one thing to be ignored, another to be mocked. And not just mocked, but diminished, erased. Right there, in front of his world. I was seconds from walking out. I wasn't going to cry. I refused to give him that. But before I could move, that voice rang out. Wait, Maya Brooks? Robert Lansing. The man I'd never spoken to. The legend behind the legend. He cut through the ballroom with the weight of a man who knew his words mattered. And somehow, he knew mine did too. The moment he said Project Phoenix, the air shifted. The room didn't understand what it meant. But they saw his reverence. They saw the sudden edge in his tone. You're the one who stopped the breach, he said, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. That saved this company, and half the financial sector. Gasps, stares, eyes widening like someone had just flipped on a light in a room too long dark. I could feel my father's gaze, sharp, stunned, burning. He didn't know. He hadn't known. Robert turned to the crowd and said, She's the reason you all still have jobs, and pensions, and stock to toast tonight. Silence. Then slowly, clapping. One by one, scattered, then swelling. I didn't know where to look. The chandeliers. The floor. Robert's hand guiding me to the stage. When he asked me to speak, I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't sure if I had anything left to say. And then I remembered every time my father told me I was wasting my potential, every time my brothers laughed behind their whiskey glasses, every time I worked in the dark to protect people who'd never see my face. So I took the mic. I wasn't invited to speak, I began, my voice soft but steady. But I've spent a lot of my life not being invited. A ripple of discomfort moved across the room. And maybe that was for the best, because it taught me to work without applause, to serve without expectation, and to build something no one could take from me. I paused, let them feel it. I'm proud of my work, not because of the title, but because it mattered. Then I looked at my father. He was still frozen, lips slightly parted, hand limp at his side. No smirk, no words. Just a man watching a truth he never thought he'd have to face. I came tonight to be polite. I finished. But I'm leaving finally free. I handed the mic back and walked off the stage to applause that was no longer awkward, but earned. The applause followed me down the steps, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I didn't come for validation, and yet I'd just torn through a silence that had held me hostage for over a decade. As I stepped off the stage, my hands were trembling, but not from nerves. It was release, the kind that shakes you when something buried too long finally surfaces and breathes. People I barely remembered began to approach me. Board members, advisors, colleagues of my father. One man grasped my hand and whispered, "I have a daughter your age. I hope she becomes half as brave." A woman with frosted hair and pearls leaned in, eyes shining. "We had no idea. We were told you'd left the industry altogether." "Had no idea. Told I'd disappeared." I smiled politely. Because what else do you do when people finally see you, but only after someone more powerful gives them permission? Robert Lansing stayed by my side. Not hovering, not claiming credit, just present. At one point, I leaned toward him and said, "How did you know?" He gave a soft, amused smile. "You didn't think a threat like that goes unsung forever, did you? I made it my business to find out who saved my firm." He paused. "Your father kept it from everyone, including me. I only discovered it because of an internal audit flag. Your code signature left a trace. The trace led to your agency. I pulled the right strings, learned the name, and I've remembered it ever since." My chest tightened. He knew. My father knew. So the man who once told me I was wasting my time with government Tinkertoy projects had known I was the firewall that saved his empire. And he still stood up there, looked me in the eyes, and reduced my entire life to a joke. Robert's voice dropped. "I waited until tonight because I knew it would matter. To you." I looked at him, tears threatening to rise. It did. "Thank you." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father descending the stage steps, his shoulders more stooped than I'd ever remembered. He didn't come toward me, not at first. He walked slowly through the crowd, shaking hands on autopilot, eyes glazed. I recognized the look. That was the look of a man whose illusion of control had just cracked. My brothers remained seated at the head table. Jonathan was furiously typing into his phone. Patrick had stopped smiling altogether. Good. Let them sit in the discomfort I'd lived in for years. I made my way to the side exit of the ballroom. The air inside felt thick, metallic. I needed oxygen. Just as I pushed through the heavy door into the hallway, I heard footsteps behind me. "Maya." I stopped. Didn't turn. The voice was slow, strained. "Maya, wait." I turned halfway. My father stood there in the empty corridor, backlit by the golden light spilling from the ballroom. For a moment he looked old. Small even. The tie that had once made him seem untouchable now hung crooked against his shirt. His voice, once so sure, now hesitated. "I didn't know. Not all of it." "You knew enough," I said quietly. He flinched. "I was trying to protect you." I tilted my head. "From what? Pride?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Then he looked away, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You should have told me," he muttered. "I did. You weren't listening." Silence fell between us, and in that silence I saw the truth. He wasn't here to apologize. Not really. He was here because his world had just shifted, and he didn't know where he stood in it anymore. The hierarchy he built, the perfect sons, the legacy, the silence, was cracking. "I'm not angry," I said, surprising both of us. "I'm exhausted." He nodded slowly. "I suppose that's fair." I took a breath, then added, "I'm not your failure, Dad. I never was. You just didn't recognize the kind of success I chose." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it. The beginning of something. Not regret. Not yet. But maybe awareness. I'll leave now, I said. I only came to be polite. His shoulders dropped. You were more than that. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest he'd ever come. I stepped into the San Francisco night, the ballroom door clicking shut behind me like punctuation. The cold air slapped my cheeks awake, but I welcomed it. It was honest, unlike the false warmth inside, wrapped in champagne smiles and inherited egos. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across the cobblestones. I walked without direction, just needing space. Each step felt lighter, like I was shedding layers of someone else's expectations. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything, not to my father, not to my brothers, not even to myself. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was Claire. A simple text. Did you do what you came for? I stared at it, then typed. I think I did something better. I let go. She replied with a heart emoji and the words, "Come home. We'll celebrate with cheap wine and chocolate." I smiled. Home. A word I once thought had to be a house with marble floors and a father who said the right things. Now I knew. It could be a tiny apartment in DC with a friend who listened, who saw me. The next morning, as I packed for my flight, a message pinged into my inbox. It was from Robert Lansing. Subject line, follow-up, message. Maya, thank you for your grace last night. I suspect many in that room saw themselves more clearly because of you. If you're ever open to a consulting role, Brooks Capital could use someone who sees past the noise. You have my number. Robert. I stared at it for a moment, then closed the laptop without replying. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I didn't need to walk back into that world to feel valid. A week later, I was back at work, knee-deep in a new federal project, building proactive threat models for critical infrastructure. My team, a mix of eager 20-somethings and a few former military operators, welcomed me with donuts and a post-it on my desk that read, Director B, Cyber Queen. I laughed out loud. The title was ridiculous, but for once, I didn't mind. During a strategy meeting that afternoon, one of the junior analysts, a nervous girl named Samira, lingered behind. "Ma'am," she said, "I saw your speech online. Someone posted a clip." My heart skipped. I didn't mean to intrude, but I just wanted to say thank you. My dad's been saying I'm wasting my time here, that I should go work for his firm. But hearing you talk about choosing a path that matters, it helped. She looked down. I needed to hear it. I swallowed hard. Gently, I said, "You'll build something no one else understands. That's your superpower. Don't trade it for applause." She smiled. I won't. After she left, I sat alone for a long moment, staring at the empty conference room. Maybe that was it. Maybe the point wasn't to fix the people who couldn't see me. Maybe it was to stand where others like me could. That night, I found a note I hadn't looked at in years. My mother's handwriting, folded in the back of an old journal. You don't need their permission to be magnificent. I let the words sink in. My mother, the only one who ever understood. The one who saw a spark when others saw a distraction. And I knew, whatever else happened, I'd never be silenced again. 3 days later, a delivery arrived at my office. A small, square package wrapped in brown paper. No card. No note. Just my name, carefully written. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was the Brooks family crest, an old brooch, heavy and ornate. I remembered it from my childhood, always sitting untouched in my father's study drawer. The one my mother had once said belonged to the one who protects the family. I stared at it. Was it an apology? A gesture? I didn't know. But I placed it gently in my drawer and closed it. Some things aren't meant to be worn. They're meant to be remembered. Spring arrived slowly in DC. Soft rain on slate rooftops. Cherry blossoms blooming in pink defiance along the riverbanks. Life, in its quiet way, was beginning again. I returned to my routines. Early mornings, agency briefings, mentoring sessions with junior staff. But something had shifted. Not outside me. Inside. I no longer flinched at my father's name, no longer rehearsed answers in case someone asked why I hadn't followed in his footsteps. I didn't need to explain anymore. One morning in April, I opened my inbox to find an email that made my breath catch. Subject: Dinner? From Patrick Brooks, my older brother. Just seeing his name made my stomach twist. The message was short. Maya, I owe you an apology. I said a lot of things. So did Dad. But after that night, I've been thinking about the kind of courage it takes to walk your own road. Would you be willing to meet? I'd like to know who you are, if you'll let me. Patrick. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then, slowly, I typed. Okay, dinner, but no suits, and you're paying. A week later, we met at a quiet place near DuPont Circle. No photographers, no board members, no gold watch politics. Just two siblings trying to find common ground. He looked tired, softer. I read everything I could about Project Phoenix, he said, hands wrapped around a coffee cup. I never knew, and I'm not proud of how we treated you. I just didn't want to admit someone outside the firm was stronger than me. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, I told you so. Instead, I asked, do you want a relationship or a redemption arc? He blinked, then smiled faintly. A relationship, if you'll have it. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a beginning. As weeks passed, we spoke more. About Mom. About growing up in that cold marble house. About what we lost. And maybe what we could reclaim. Not the legacy, but the chance to build something better. One truth at a time. One afternoon, Patrick mentioned that Dad had been asking about me. He reads your interviews now, he said, and he asked if you might let him meet you halfway. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I mailed my father a photo. Just one. Me and Claire at a military cybersecurity summit in Arizona, standing in front of a crowd of young women in uniform, all smiling. On the back, I wrote, "This is my legacy." He never replied, but that was fine, because sometimes healing isn't about the apology you're given, it's about the power to no longer need it. I stayed close with Patrick. David, not so much. He never reached out. Maybe he couldn't face it. Maybe he didn't care. Either way, I made peace with the silence. In July, I gave a talk at a national conference on cyber defense. It was streamed to over 10,000 people. Near the end, I told a story. I was once called a failure, I said, by someone who couldn't imagine a world outside their own reflection. But I've learned that true worth isn't measured by who claps for you in a ballroom. It's in what you choose to protect, even when no one's looking. When I stepped off the stage, a girl no older than 20 rushed up to me, eyes wide. My dad says I'm wasting my time, she said breathlessly, but after today, I think I'll keep going. I smiled. Good, I told her. That's how you build something no one can take away. Later that night, I walked home under the quiet stars of DC, the lights low, the air warm. Claire had left wine on the table and a note. You did good. Again. And I realized. I didn't rise in spite of being mocked. I rose because I stopped waiting to be chosen. Because I chose myself. If you're hearing this now, maybe you need that reminder too. That you're enough. Even when they can't see it. Especially then. Find the people who do. Build a life so loud their silence becomes irrelevant. My name is Maya Brooks, and my father once called me a failure. But the world? The world knows better now.